A police officer struck Ronda Rousey with a baton, but after a moment, he realized he had picked the wrong person. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about which city you're from. As the late afternoon sun bathed the park in a warm golden light, its rays gently filtered through the thick canopy of oak and maple trees. The air was fragrant with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, mixing with the distant sound of children laughing and birds chirping rhythmically. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, providing brief moments of relief from the summer warmth. Joggers padded along the winding trails, their steady footsteps echoing on the paved paths, while families relaxed on blankets, sharing sandwiches and stories. A group of teenagers played catch near the playground, their joyful shouts rising above the peaceful park sounds. Dogs barked playfully as they chased after frisbees, while an occasional cyclist rang their bell, weaving through the park's meandering paths with ease. Near a large, weathered oak tree stood an old wooden bench, its paint worn by years of sun and rain. On it sat a lone woman, her presence unobtrusive yet quietly commanding. She seemed to blend with the park, calm, natural, rooted. With one arm resting casually on the back of the bench, the other holding a small protein bar which she slowly broke into pieces, scattering crumbs at her feet. A cluster of pigeons eagerly pecked at the bits, their heads bobbing in rhythmic hunger. She watched them, silent and meditative, her lips pressed into a neutral line, neither smiling nor frowning. Ronda Rousey. There was something primal in her stillness, a power forged through years of battle, discipline, and pain. Her body, clothed in black athletic leggings and a simple gray hoodie, was a sculpted reflection of a lifetime in combat sports. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, framing a face defined by determination, sharp cheekbones, piercing eyes, and a jawline that spoke of resolve. She radiated a calm that only comes from someone who has weathered storms and learned to stand unmoved within them. Beneath that calm, however, there was something more, a dormant force, ready to awaken, though it sought no reason to do so. Today, she wasn't a fighter. She was simply a woman at rest, enjoying a rare moment of peace, with no opponents, no cameras, no crowds. The peaceful sounds of the park continued until the heavy, deliberate sound of footsteps broke the rhythm, each step sharp and purposeful. The cadence of the stride sliced through the soft ambience like a blade, and the thud of polished boots against pavement signaled a presence that demanded attention and compliance. The man carrying those steps was felt before he was seen, Officer Brent Carlisle, a towering figure in his meticulously pressed LAPD uniform. Carlisle moved through the park with the confidence of a predator surveying its territory. His mirrored sunglasses reflected the world in cold, impersonal fragments, hiding the sharp gaze beneath. His utility belt clinked faintly with the polished instruments of authority, a baton, handcuffs, a taser, and a firearm, all reminders of his power. His square-jawed face, set in a hard professional mask, carried the expression of a man who had learned long ago that the world responded to force and dominance. Carlisle wasn't known for his patience or kindness. He wielded his authority like a weapon, one he used comfortably and without guilt. Over time, the people in this part of the city had learned that challenging him had swift consequences. Most adapted to survival by quietly complying, and those who didn't rarely forgot their mistake. As he patrolled the park, his hidden eyes scanned the crowds, mentally categorizing joggers, dog walkers, and couples as harmless. Then, his gaze landed on the woman sitting alone on the bench. There was something about her that struck him as wrong. She wasn't breaking any laws, but her stillness felt out of place, too self-contained. She wasn't jogging, picnicking, or walking a dog. She was simply sitting, and Carlisle disliked stillness without purpose. In his experience, people who lingered alone in public spaces were either loiterers or troublemakers, sometimes both. His lips curled slightly in quiet disdain. He had encountered types like her before, those who carried themselves with stubborn self-assurance, as if authority applied only to others. People who challenged, resisted, and believed the rules didn't apply to them. Carlisle took it as his personal duty to correct such people, and in his mind, it was a public service. Veering off the main path, he changed direction, moving directly toward the bench. His boots struck the ground with purpose, announcing his presence long before his voice would need to. As he closed the distance, his fingers brushed the handle of his baton, an automatic gesture born of anticipation, not necessity. Though he didn't expect trouble, he was always ready to assert his authority if it came. Around them, life in the park continued. Another woman walking her dog slowed, her eyes flicking between Carlisle and the woman on the bench, sensing something beneath the surface. A group of young men playing catch exchanged knowing glances, recognizing the signs of an impending confrontation. When Carlisle arrived, he stopped, his imposing shadow falling over Ronda. He stood with his feet planted wide, hands resting on his belt, exuding the aura of authority that demanded compliance. The pigeons scattered at his arrival, their wings flapping loudly as they fled, sensing the tension. Yet Ronda remained unchanged. She didn't tense, shift, or even acknowledge his presence. Her posture stayed composed, the sun partially blocked by his towering frame, casting half of her face in shadow. Beneath her hoodie's brim, a flicker of irritation sparked in Carlisle's eyes. He was used to people shifting, offering explanations or apologies, showing submissiveness. But this woman did none of those things. No recognition, no response, no obedience. The air thickened, muffling the sounds of the park under the invisible pressure of the moment. Time seemed to hold its breath. Carlisle inhaled slowly, forcing down the rising impatience. Usually, people realized who they were dealing with and responded accordingly. But this woman remained unmoved, as if his presence meant nothing. The silence between them was broken only by the sound of Carlisle's boots grinding slightly against the pavement. His fingers flexed, brushing the baton handle again, an instinctual movement born from waiting rather than need. He didn't enjoy escalating situations without cause, but he never hesitated when a reason presented itself. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the park's winding paths. The golden warmth of the day faded into the cool edge of twilight. Yet, within the space they shared, one seated and one standing, the air was charged, heavy with something unseen but inevitable. The park continued its peaceful rhythms, but those close enough to notice felt it, an intangible shift in the atmosphere, the calm before a storm. With a sharp crack, and the world seemed to shudder beneath him. The crowd around them drew a collective breath, the silence following the clash hanging thick and oppressive. Officer Carlisle lay there, momentarily stunned, his breath shallow, as his body struggled to process the fall. He blinked up at the clear sky, still disoriented, the power, pride, and authority he'd built his life on completely shattered in an instant. Ronda Rousey, still seated, didn't flinch, didn't even seem to acknowledge the officer's fall beyond a slight shift in posture. She remained as she had been all along, unmoved, calm, composed. Her strength wasn't just in her body, but in the stillness that surrounded her, the kind of power that didn't require a single word or action to be understood. The officer, now lying on the ground, felt the crushing weight of his humiliation. He wanted to move, to get up, to assert himself, but the weight of the moment, the utter defeat, held him there. The crowd's gaze was as unforgiving as the concrete beneath him, the eyes of witnesses now forever burned into his mind. The feeling of being watched, judged, and exposed felt like a new kind of vulnerability he had never known. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Carlisle managed to push himself up, his body still trembling slightly with the lingering adrenaline and the sharp sting of embarrassment. He avoided looking at the woman who had so effortlessly dismantled him, but the eyes of everyone around him made it impossible to ignore his failure. The crowd slowly dispersed, the murmur of their conversations rising again, though it was punctuated with disbelief, laughter, and the occasional hushed voice. Ronda remained where she was, the pigeons once again gathering at her feet as though nothing had changed. Carlisle, now standing but broken, knew he had lost more than just the confrontation. He had lost respect, control, and perhaps even the understanding of the very force he had once wielded so confidently.